Happy Sunday, beautiful patrons. As always, thank you for your love and your support. If you remember, I've been pretty honest saying that a large part of my pursuit for the religious experience was trying to gain insight on or the power of how to control my emotions. If I could control my emotions, then I could control my behavior. I will be honest in saying much of my pursuit of the religious experience was not so much in trying to be saved as it was trying to feel sane. I was riddled with panic and anxiety and fears. And so, this subject of whether or not we have control over our emotions, a subject that we are dealing with out of an article that I found in Psychology Today, links, author's name, and so forth are in the description, is a very important subject to me, and it seems to have some resonance with the rest of you. So, let's continue on, and we're talking about the total control theory, we've been talking about the total control theory. Now we've moved on to the no control theory, which would make a person basically say, look, it's just how I feel. Get used to it. Or, hey, I'm just reporting on how I feel, as if there's a thermometer that is able to gauge accurately our emotions, and we're going to report on those emotions accurately. This theory also gives us the idea that there's one emotion per incident, and you can either read it out loud or not. You can be honest about it or not honest about it. But it also leaves us with the feeling that the main attitude of the no control theory is take it or leave it. But I ain't going to change it. It is the way it is, and I'm sending you this clear and stubborn signal. So the next paragraph, the author goes on to say, on the receiving end, there's also reasons we would want to assume that there's one feeling to read in any given situation. Think about that. It benefits us if we believe that there's one particular type of feeling that a person can have in any situation. The author says we want people to be authentic with us, to tell us what they're really feeling. Isn't it a travesty that our reality, our worlds, this is me speaking now, wraps up inside our minds, is housed within our skulls, and we lack the ability of truly getting into the other person's mind and knowing what they feel or what they're doing. Underlying this emphasis on authenticity is a pragmatic concern. We hope people will read out their emotional thermometers accurately so that we can tell where they stand, and chiefly so we can tell if their attitudes are stable or changeable. We take multiple temperature readings, asking things like, how do you feel about me now? And I love this part. This is such a clever part. Watch this. Or, in partnership, asking the question, I love you. Clarification. The author says, I know it doesn't look like a question, but it often is. Translating, do you still love me now? Think of how many times we tell someone we love them when our motivation, maybe sometimes even unknown to us, our motivation is to find out if they still love us, to get them to say those words out loud. Also indicating that we put a lot of weight into words when maybe we should not. I definitely put too much weight into words. So the author goes on and says, if your emotional response is incompatible with mine, for example, you don't like me, I hope it's flexible and will change to something more compatible. I track and seek fluctuations. If it is compatible with mine, for example, you like me, then I hope it won't change to something less compatible. I track and seek reliability. The no-control theory of emotions eliminates a complicating variable in our speculations about how people are being with us. If they have no control over what they feel, then the only question is whether they're reporting honestly. If instead they could feel multiple things at any moment, it becomes much harder to tell whether they're being honest. Asking them to tell you how they really feel becomes less asking someone to read. It becomes like asking someone to read alphabet soup aloud while the soup is being stirred. It's hard to tell if they read it right. Gosh, that's reality. That's so real. In between total control and no control, there must be some alternative theory that's hard to look at squarely because these practical strategic concerns obstruct our view. In truth, we're not emotionally omnipotent in any situation. Some emotions are harder to access no matter how much you change your story or behavior. Think of this. This is me speaking now. I'm repeating. In some situations, some emotions are harder to access no matter how much you change your story or behavior. If you listen to the last episode, the third episode of Hope After Faith podcast, then you saw how me, but also in particular, and much more importantly, Bobby, has been able to change his story and thus change his behavior towards his abusive father. But nevertheless, no matter how much he would be able to change his story, change his behavior, there are still emotions that he might not be able to easily bring to the surface or even be aware of. This could lead to some of the bad days that he spoke about during the podcast, because those emotions are buried or hidden. And of course, he was very honest, saying that, he's done everything he can to not leave anything buried. He's spent time with therapists. He's worked on this subject for years and years and years. But nevertheless, when you hear a story as intense as his, it's easy to see how these emotions are not so easily read, like a thermostat or a thermometer might be easily read, in a far less painful way. I know that my emotions have surfaced to the top as time has gone by, emotions that I was not aware of suffering with until the right circumstance exposed them. So going back to the article, the author says, nor are our emotions like thermometer readings responding automatically in a predetermined way to our circumstances. We're neither omnipotent nor impotent. We're impotent. He's got a great little play on words here. We have some power. I think we need to assert a more problematic approach to emotions, one that holds open the possibility of alternative emotional responses to circumstances, but doesn't pretend that you could feel anything to which you put your mind to. He goes on to say that in the next article, next week, I'll talk about feelsability, the feasibility of feeling this emotion or that in any given situation. It's like an instantaneous emotional weather forecast. In this moment, 20% chance of resentment and 80% chance of forgiveness. I'll read ahead and see if it will be beneficial for us to dig into that article as well. But what I think is most important from these three messages really does, in my opinion, really does get capsulated by his conclusion of his article, that we're not omnipotent, we're not completely impotent, we have some impotence. We are able to control our emotions to a certain degree by reframing, by telling ourselves a different story, by taking the time to pause and allow emotions to flow through us. I learned a very powerful technique dealing with panic attacks and anxiety disorders of just allowing yourself to feel the feelings. It's instinctive to resist, to physically tighten your muscles, to shorten your breath, to resist negative feelings. And Unfortunately, in some cases, that only intensifies those feelings because the nervous system is attempting to tell you something. And if you don't respond to it in the way the nervous system thinks that you should respond to it, it just intensifies the signals because it thinks it's not being paid attention to. And this is important. And so allowing those feelings to pass through you. I can't tell you how many times I've had to experience this during bad turbulence flying. We'll talk about all of that some other day. But relaxing and being very aware of these feelings, what they are and why you're feeling them, and allowing them to pass through, in some cases seems to have stopped the cycle, or at least gotten the cycle over with much more quickly in my life, in my experience. So that's in some ways a way that I'm exerting control over the emotion. Taking this all the way back to the very beginning of the thought, finding myself in religion and desiring so completely to have the ability to change my behavior and change my feelings. I don't know if you caught it or not, but a foundation, a layer below what we're talking about right now, is an assumption that what I'm feeling was wrong or was inappropriate or was negative, or how those feelings made me behave was inappropriate or was negative. I think that's the next level. I think that's the next place for us to go in this discussion, is digging even deeper and trying to diagnose, in my case in particular, why it was that obviously some of these emotions like panic or like anxiety or fear was biologically negative. And it was something that, I think almost anyone instinctively would try to avoid, if not run away from. But was some of the behavior that it produced, was I compelled to control that behavior because, and I'll just cut to the chase, because from my religious background, I had been encouraged, if not commanded, to be perfect, even as my Father in heaven was perfect? I think there's a root there that needs to be dug up and investigated. So, as always, thank you for staying with us. Thank you for supporting us. Hopefully by now you can see that we're giving the messages, we're giving the gaming videos as an encouragement, as showing our appreciation for you being there. We try to put out something almost every day just as an encouragement for you being there. But it took us a while, but finally we made our way to what Patreon is really paying for and really helping support. And that's our involvement in the Hope After Faith podcast. So thank you so much for everything that you do. We love you so very, very much. Talk to you soon.